So Nigel Farage has come on a press conference with Sky News 3 days ago and has stated that he believes that there's an argument that the minimum wage for young people is too high. And I just think it is just absolutely bizarre. So I wanted to find the exact snippet that said this. So for anyone that's interested in finding the speech, we're talking about this Sky News speech. I'll put the link in the bio. Farage predicts early general election in 2027 due to economic collapse. Okay. And this is minute 49 and 3 seconds, where someone, I believe from the Daily Mail, asked the following question. So I'm going to press play and let's hear it from the horse's mouth, exactly what he's saying.
Is the minimum wage too high? Would reform lower it or scrap it to boost aspiration?
Sorry, say that again.
Is the minimum wage too high? Would reform lower it or scrap it to boost aspiration?
There's an argument the minimum wage is too high for younger workers.
So the question was, in general, is there an argument that the minimum wage is too high? And it's him in this speech that's literally pivoted it and narrowed it down to young people, which I just think is just crazy, absolutely crazy. Okay, it's either too high for all, but what the hell does age have to do with it? So let's hear how he's going to justify this.
Particularly given that we've lowered the level at which NIC is paid to $5,000 a year. So do one or the other. Do one or the other. Either lift the cap at which NI is due, or lower the minimum wage for lower workers. But you know what? I'd say this to the Chancellor: do something. Do something. Because for so many young people, that first job, and it can be in a pub or wherever it may be, it's a very, very important part of growing up, becoming part of a working, contributing adult. So I would urge the Chancellor to do
so. Yes, your first job is part of your growth. But again, that takes nothing away from the fact that you're doing exactly the same job as someone who's your senior. Now, of course, you know, there's this argument that, oh, they're less experienced. And I'm going to show a talk by LBC where someone's trying to make this whole argument that, oh, look, you're a junior, so you should be paid less because you're less experienced. Older people have more experience. I get that. Fine. Do a clause like they used to where you're in training for 3, 4, 5 months and you get paid less because, yes, they are teaching you something and you're in training. But once you are at the same level of competency as someone else and you're fully trained and you're doing the exact like-for-like job, why on earth should you make less money than the person that's doing the same exact job? That doesn't make any sense. You know, I've got colleagues that are 10, have been 10, 15 years younger than me, making even more money than me because they went out in the field and they escalated their experience quicker than me. In some cases, you know, I work in sales. They got into a scenario where they were selling £1 million deals way before me because sometimes life happens like that. And that person ended up being more senior than me. There have been scenarios where I've been the older colleague of the two, and a younger colleague has been making much more money than me. It just is what it is. But that's justified based on experience, based on a know-how, etc., etc. And that person essentially was doing a different job to me, or was managing a whole different set of accounts and contracts that required a high level of confidence from the company. Fair enough. But to just say, if we're doing the same like-for-like job, selling the same value of products with the same complexity, etc., etc., why on earth should I get more money than someone who's 20 years old, just simply because I'm older? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And I just think this is a horrible way of thinking about it. And I'm just shocked. We have here a guy who the next day, you know, this was I saw 2 days ago on LBC, you know, one of these supporters of reform have come onto LBC and trying to justify Nigel Farage's words, and he hones in on the hospitality sector specifically.
Is leader of Reform UK in Portsmouth. George, great to have you back on the programme. Are young people on the minimum wage earning too much?
Yes.
Why?
I think, do you know what? When I heard this today, I was actually kind of relieved because it's something that I felt for about a year, and I've never discussed it with HQ in any capacity. But I've worked in massive business sectors where, to be honest with you, in holiday park sectors, where a ginormous portion of the employees pre-COVID were young people, were 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, people leaving university during the summer and coming back. What's happened in those industries because of the minimum wage increase for these young people is those jobs have become desolate because employers, big national employers, are now looking at the pros and cons. And let's make no mistake that someone that's 40 years old with 25 years of hospitality experience is definitely more preferable to someone that's 18 years old with only a year of hospitality experience. And it's actually hurt the young people more than it's helped them. I personally, if you're asking me, wouldn't lower the wage when we take over government. But I do think that the minimum wage should probably be frozen for that age for a number
George,
of years.
Why would you freeze the minimum wage?
I think that's absolutely bizarre, especially when we're talking about the fact that we're concerned about families, you know, that the lack of people having children, the lack of young people being able to get onto the property ladder, and you just come in and you make it even harder for them to progress. Again, it just doesn't make any sense, you know, and for him to say, oh, this other person's got an extra 15, 17 years of experience. There are cases where, yeah, he's absolutely right. A 45-year-old could run rings around a 19-year-old in terms of a specific role. You know, again, that would mean that the other person is probably a manager or middle management, or there's probably a hierarchy to reflect that experience. But again, if we're talking a like for like worker, specifically in the hospitality sector or the retail sector, you go into a Tesco's, you have someone who a young man, 19-year-old, he's stacking the shelves, might be putting the broccoli in the vegetable aisle. 10 meters down the line, you have somebody else that's 32 and he's stacking the tomato shelf, and they do a like for like comparison, same role with the same amount of authority, etc., etc. What are you talking about? What experience? Like, I'm not trying to demean this idea that there's you know, you can't be good at that type of job and that there isn't skill required. Of course there's skill required, but again, put the individual in a training period, and that should level the playing field.
You freeze the minimum wage for one age group and not another. Why should young people be paid less for the exact same job that somebody a bit older than them is being paid more to do?
Because they haven't got the experience to do so. When I was 16 years old, my first job was working in a fruit and veg store for £3 in my pocket every hour, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. But you learn when you're young, Ben. I'm sure you've been in the same position. Maybe you're an apprentice at a local radio firm. You start at the bottom and you work your way up, right?
But I'm talking about the same jobs here. If you are a waiter in a restaurant, for example, and you both got the same level of experience, you've got somebody who's 35 and somebody who's 18, you think they should be paid different wages simply because of that age gap?
Absolutely. There's
That's
so many...
outrageous, George.
It's not outrageous.
That's discrimination.
It's not. I own restaurants. I literally, that is my job. I own restaurants. I own businesses in hospitality. And I'm telling you now that I've employed a lot of young people, a lot of really good young people too. But there's certain qualities, especially in hospitality, that you can't learn without age. You know, you
Like
learn...
what?
Well, interactions with customers, for
You
example.
don't think 18-year-olds are capable of interacting with your customers?
Of course they are, but they don't have the quality of life experience. They don't have the experience of how to deal with difficult customers, how to deal with complaint situations. These are things that you learn with age. And I know it's unpopular to say. I know that
Training. What happened to good old training? I mean, how long does this guy think that it takes for a young person to learn how to deal with customers and have a customer friendly attitude, deal with a refund? I mean, I remember being 18 years old and working in Monsoon Accessorize. And, you know, I started off, of course, in the first 2 months, you're naff, you're nervous. You know, you don't have to talk to customers. Fine. Pay me lower than the rest of the staff because I don't have that confidence. I'm still in the training period. But about at month 5, you're no longer nervous speaking to customers. You say hello to people all the time. You know how to do the standards of the shop floor, how to keep it organized. Then all of a sudden someone says, you know what, I want to trust you to use the till. So you start using the till. Fair enough. Now I'm in the same par as a kind of a middle tier member of the team. Bump up my pay. Then all of a sudden, the manager says, do you know what? I'm going to train you to do refunds because I'm tired of you calling me every single time that that you need a refund. So they train you and then you bump up again. And then last but not least, at the end of the day, got to count the cash with the manager. Usually you're there just checking that she's not stealing because they always have to cash up with someone else. And then one day they say, look, can you learn how to count the cash? And they train you on that too. And that's how your career progresses. You get merit on experience. But if I go through all of that transition, why on earth would somebody else who's just older than me automatically have the higher benefit of having a higher minimum wage than me just because of age? I genuinely don't understand this. This is so backwards. I'm going to give this guy a couple of minutes more and I'm going to pivot into something else just to really bring this home.
Aren't going to like it. I certainly wouldn't have liked it if I was younger either. But trust me when I say, Ben, young people are being harmed by this increase in national wage. I know.
Young people are being harmed by getting a pay rise.
Yes, because the job opportunities are not there like they were, and you might not agree with that, but it's factual. As I say, I worked up until very recently in an incredibly large holiday park company, incredibly large. It employed thousands of people, Ben, and I was one of the key employers. And the mentality from the boardroom was we now shift from employing 18, 19, 20-year-olds to people that are older.
George, do you see any flaws in this pitch to young people? Vote for us. Vote reform at the next election. We will
Yeah,
raise your pay.
and there you go.
Absolutely.
There you go. And I'm so happy for it. I'm so happy that finally the cracks are starting to show in this stupid party. About 2 weeks ago, I've been very quiet on YouTube, but around 2 weeks ago, I actually took the liberty of reading both the Reform Manifesto or the promise that they did earlier on. I think it was this year or last year. And I also read the Conservative one as well, just to understand, because I found it so overwhelming, especially over the last 2 or 3 weeks, to see just how racist and the amount of attacks that ethnic minorities are getting in this country. And, the media's been telling us, yeah, reform's coming. It's going to, the new Conservative Party is now going to be Reform, and the Conservatives are now, they're dead. This is, it looks like this country is going to vote Reform. And I just thought to myself, right, so Reform, there's been a lot of so-called racist movements that have been aligned to them. The fact that they're anti-immigration, they're attacking refugees and really just claiming that, or over-claiming that it's the refugees and it's all these kind of foreign people that are sucking the economic life out of the country. Seems like they've got nothing positive to say about immigrants. And then you pair that with the whole flag movement that's been happening in certain areas as well. It all looked hella racist, and I just didn't want to believe it. So I thought to myself, right, if Reform are really going to win, let's take the time to actually read their policies, because surely this is not a racist country. I love Britain, and I don't come across racist people that often, or at least outwardly racist people. So I couldn't believe that people would vote Reform purely from a racist standpoint. There's just no way. I believe in the British people more than that, So yeah, that's why I came and I went and I read the I like to call it a manifesto, but they call it a contract or whatever. It's 27 pages or odd long. And, going through this document, I started to really look objectively and say, right, how racist is this really? And why would you vote for this if just as a normal person, someone who's not just focused on racism or getting rid of brown people and foreigners and keeping the place with British values, whatever that means, right? Or the British culture and identity is at risk. Surely there's people that are voting for this party other than that message. So again, first page is all about blaming different people, the country is both financially and culturally worse off, that type of talk, just blame. And we have the contents page, the pledges, then straight into immigration. Page 5 is literally what they first address. Page 5. Then page 6, they talk about spending. It's all about cutting foreign aid. Again, collecting billions of unpaid tax, Brexit, all of that stuff. And then I start to see some of the promises that could attract people that aren't really focused on Brexit and immigration. And I started to think, wow, these are really strong promises. So it's like, look, make work pay, lift the income tax start point to £20,000 a year. My God, if they did that, most lower income families would vote reform immediately. I mean, that's so attractive. You could be black, white, Indian, whatever, right? That's going to be attractive. And the first thing, when I was reading, I was like, oh my God, they've come out promising. I mean, that promise alone is crazy. Like, if Labour, if that was, I started to think to myself, if that was possible, if they could really pull that off, wouldn't Labour already be doing it? I mean, literally, their brand has always been kind of helping the working class. And I just thought, how realistic is this? Then they went, okay, save households up to £500 a year by lowering the fuel duty by 20p per litre. So they're probably thinking about, again, drill baby drill, P&D, the Trump method of using different fuels and getting rid of carbon efficiency and all of that good stuff and going back to the old days. They're going to cut residential stamp duty. So again, coming back to like household earners. Very attractive. Abolish the VAT tourist tax, abolish inheritance tax. And I mean, there's just more and more and more promises. And now it just seems like the cracks are showing. I mean, this is what we just witnessed, focused on an attack. That's it, really. Let's just call it that. It's an attack on young people, young workers. This is the first crack. And you know what? Nigel Farage has already come in and said, yeah, I've conceded that we were a bit unrealistic. We've had to change because, the country's worse off than we thought when we wrote that contract. So it was a load of rollicks. The whole damn thing is, and you know what I love about this? We've got plenty of time for this party to show its true colours. Because what they wrote, all this beautiful stuff in, I forget the immigration stuff. I'm not really a fan of it. But let's just say cutting the stuff that's dividing the nations, right? They've written some policies in there or some promises that could be attractive to anyone in the country, but they're just not realistic. They're just not realistic. And this is just the first crack. Yeah, I think this party is received much more attention than it's deserved. And that's what's really been scaring me over the last 3 weeks. I've been hella quiet because I haven't been able to understand exactly how we got to that point of giving this party so much attention and making the UK look so racist, when from my own personal experience, it just doesn't feel that way. So then let's pivot to the amount of abuse that retail workers are going through because of shoplifting, crime rates. And I just wanted to share this story. Now, remember what we've just heard. Young workers, let's cap their minimum wage over the next few years so that they can work in retail and they can gain these amazing experiences and, grow as people, etc., because they are the least experienced of our society, so they should be paid less. And then let's look at the jobs that they're going to have to handle. Okay, so here we have this case study. A former shop worker has nightmares over abuse at work.
I'd been alerted to a member of the public in the store filling a basket quite aggressively. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can kind of tell when they're a shoplifter. So it's kind of headed for the exit to try and recover the goods. Obviously, as you can see in the footage, didn't really go kind of plain sailing. When I was at that store specifically, that was happening multiple times a day. I've been punched, I've been spat at, I've had people lunge at me with knives and everything. And over the 7 years that I worked in retail, it's just got worse and worse. I'll never step foot on a shop floor again. I've suffered from PTSD. I've had nightmares and everything, waking up sweating in the middle of the night, feeling like I've genuinely just relived the whole experience all over again. Yeah, I can never work on a customer facing role again like that. I feel like there's not enough protection in place for staff, and yeah, it's not something you want to experience. Not just myself, many of my colleagues as well have really suffered. It's a minimum wage job. You don't expect the abuse and the violence that you see every day and that you experience every day. But yeah, unfortunately, it just becomes the norm. I think people just need to remember that we're human beings as well as everybody else.
And that's it. hear that. I've got this man, a young man to be fair. He's experiencing abuse. The shop's understaffed. We know this. Men say it's understaffed because, specifically because of the minimum wage. So people are employing less. No, the companies, do you really think that if the companies can get away with reducing their operational spend and they can just continue doing things this way, they'll hire the young people, but the headcount isn't going to go up per store? I don't like. If you believe that, then you believe in a socialist society. You believe that companies think socially. No, they don't. They think shareholder value. They think about reducing operational costs and increasing profits. And unless some form of legislation is mandated for them to do otherwise, they'll continue making money. No one is voluntarily going to make less money. It's that simple. So here we have this young man, sharing the amount of abuse that he's received after working several years in retail. And you're telling me that you're going to chastise young workers who are going to be working in these conditions and paying them less, even though they're receiving the same amount of abuse. It doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, in conclusion, really sad that some people may see young people to be of less value in society, especially when we think about all the other pressures they're going through. Junior roles being replaced by AI, not being able to afford their homes. I mean, we're becoming a bit like other cultures now where we live at home with our parents in our 40s, some people even early 40s, because they simply can't afford to move out. That's now become a norm. There's the pressure of setting up families, being able to have children. A lot of people just opting out of that now because they just don't want to bring people into the world, children into the world and not be able to give them a good life. They're being criticized for small pleasures. It just seems like it's just hopelessness from all angles, and then we're going to speak about them in this way. It doesn't make any sense, and we really need to start prioritizing young people because ultimately they're the future. Yeah, cheers.